Yeah. Okay, awesome. And the reason that we're recording this is so that you guys can, look back on it if you're ever interested in digging deeper in a specific topic that I talk about, or anything like that, or if you want to show someone else, again, this whole lecture was created in order to spread information. So that's always my priority. I also want to say that we are going to go through a lot in this lecture. So please take notes. Please, if you have writing materials, if you want to take notes on your phone, if you can do that, make sure that you are writing down, especially the specific vocabulary that I mentioned, because that's what's going to allow you to do your own research in a much deeper way, right? Because if we're just looking up like people from Africa, oh my God, there's thousands of tribes. We'll never get to what we're trying to get to, right? But if we know specific names and places and things like that, then we can really look deep into their histories. So take good notes. I'm gonna start sharing my screen with the presentation. Just give me one moment.
Just one moment, Cha.
Oh, yes. Are you here?
I am here. I've been here, but my connections are not working properly from phone to TV. But I hear everything. Welcome again. And I really, really appreciate everyone who's joined us. Um, it's wonderful to be able to do this for us. And I thank you, each of you, and thank you, Ja, for your presentation.
Of course. Thank you so much for that. Okay, let's get to it, guys. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about the 10 heritage tribes. This is essentially what I call the 10 tribes that were most taken during slavery, and so are our descendants as Black diasporic people. Some things that I want you to be able to come away from this lecture understanding and knowing is to be able to identify the names, faces, and specific traditions of our original ancestors. And I also want you to be able to understand how they inform our traditions today. Now, the way that I'm going to go through this presentation, I'm going to cover about three tribes at a time, and then I'm going to open it up for some questions. The reason that I do it this way is because, like I said, it's a lot of very dense material, and I don't want you guys to lose interest, right? I want you guys to be engaged, and I also don't
They
want
talk about the
questions.
10 tribes from Africa,
Can you please mute
the
yourself?
most taken from family.
VDMTHLL.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
you're good. You're good. Like I said, everybody got to double check because I know it happens and there's a lot of us on here. It's okay. All right.
VMIT, meet yourself.
Here we go. Gotcha. Okay. So, like I said, please make sure that you are ready to, ask some questions every three tribes or so. Because I also don't want you guys to wait all the way until the end because I promise you will not remember your questions if I have you guys wait till the end. So, we're gonna yeah, go through about three at a time and then do questions. All right. So before we get too deep into it, I did want to talk a little bit about my tutoring program, Akomantoso Pan-African Tutoring. So like I said, I'm very passionate about education. I was actually a substitute teacher this past year. Right now, I'm currently possibly full-time working at the Museum or the San Antonio African American Archives. We'll see. We'll see. But I also, I really enjoy doing tutoring. I can do, K through eighth grade, just tutoring support, but also Black history tutoring and lessons for children, for adults, for families, like we're doing now. So just keep that in mind. This is the name of my Facebook page as well. So if you guys are interested in learning more about that, please feel free to look me up. Okay. So obviously the reason we're having this whole conversation today is because of the transatlantic slave trade, right? So I really wanted to include some maps so that we can get familiar with the areas that we're talking about, with the people that we're talking about, and with the routes that we're talking about. And if you've never heard the phrase the Black diaspora, it describes the enslaved African people who were taken all over the world and the cultures they created. This includes much of the Caribbean, South America, North America, and more. So I will be saying that phrase a lot in this presentation, Black diaspora. Diaspora is essentially any kind of non-consensual movement of people getting pushed out of anywhere. That's a diaspora. Um, so when you look at this first map, this is, just kind of a general map of West Africa, which we'll be talking about today, of course. We have the Senegambia, Upper Guinea, and so on and so forth. And then the second map, which I'm really excited to go back to towards the end of our presentation, this shows the specific ethnic groups that are in West Africa, and obviously showing a lot of just Africa in general, but the obviously the area that we will be focusing on is West Africa. So the really, really cool thing about this map is when I show you guys at the end of the presentation, you will be familiar with the names that are on this map. So that's really, really cool, right? Because it looks very dense right now. So it's going to be cool for you to be more familiar with the map. And then the last one, of course, is the routes of the transatlantic slave trade. And it kind of shows how many folks went to the Americas, how many folks went to the Caribbean, how many folks went to South America. Another thing is talking about slavery and the dynamics of slavery, right? What was slavery like before European colonization, in contrast to during European colonization? So before European colonization, slavery was more similar to indentured servitude. This means that, there was a term that you served, and at the end of that term, you are now either a free citizen or welcome to go somewhere else or whatever the case may be. An example of this is in the Muslim Empire. You not necessarily had a term that you served, but if you converted to Islam, you could no longer be a slave and you were allowed to become a full-fledged citizen, which is why so many Black people in the Islamic world were able to become mathematicians and astronomers and politicians and all these things and really become a part of the Islamic world was because they were able to go from a slave to something else, which brings us to our next point. In many cultures, slaves had the possibility to become full citizens. Owners could not abuse their slaves in most cases. Obviously, every culture is different, but in a majority of cultures, this is someone who is essentially offering their labor to you, whether consensual or not. And so to abuse them is kind of against the point. And then children of slaves could often become free as well. So slavery was not something that was supposed to be like this lifelong practice that then extended into like generations and generations after you, right? Um, and then, of course, during European colonization, all of that is flipped on its head. The possibility of freedom was extremely low. Freed slaves still experienced segregation and racism. Abuse and extreme violence towards slaves was commonplace. And descendants of slaves were automatically lifelong slaves as well. And the reason that I bring this point up is, there are a lot of people in our community who feel that we were betrayed by our own people and how could they sell us to something so cruel? And while I absolutely agree with that, and, I cannot defend anyone's actions and there's no justification for that kind of cruelty. At the same time, I do think that we have to have a little bit of understanding and context to the fact that our people in Africa had no idea the level of cruelty that they were selling us into because the world at large had never seen something so sick. The way that slave ships were, with all of this death and disease and like disgustingness, like that was not normal or commonplace, you know. And then for us to continue to experience just extreme levels of violence once we landed as well. They really could not comprehend why. European people were even taking so many people in the first place and what they were really taking them into. There are actually myths of, folks who lived on the slave coast believing that the white people were taking slaves to be fed by some sort of monster in the ocean or something because they really could not understand, like, why would you need to take millions of people? What is this for? But they also, the conditions which created this, our people in Africa were often coerced into giving slaves. It wasn't usually a choice. It was usually a political tool of like, either we're going to destroy your entire empire, your entire city, we're going to attack you relentlessly, or you give us XYZ number of people, right? So it really isn't a choice. It's like the lesser of two evils, so to speak, which there really isn't one. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on as well. But I do just want to give that context because, folks will say, like, oh, well, there was slavery everywhere, and as some kind of justification for what European people did, when in reality, like, there was just never this level of violence ever. And people were not practicing slavery in the same way. The ability to become free existed for most people. And they also weren't hunting people after they escaped too. Like that's just such a crazy concept. And now we get to go into the actual tribes. So the first tribe that we're going to talk about are the Mbundu people. They are a very large ethnic group in Angola, and they founded the Ndongo Kingdom. The word Angola actually comes from their language, Kimbundu, and it's the word for ruler or Ngola. So
I
Angola.
have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
I know you said, because I didn't want you to move on too deep. So I was always taught from, or told that, yes, it was one, our own people that walked us to the boat. So, but it's not until later I found out that some people actually say, hey, I'm not getting on that boat. I'd rather drown. So just when you just before you move on to the next section, is that true? To people really just said, no, I'm not getting on that boat. I'm drowning. I'm gonna go ahead and just jump in the water and never mind. Like just to kind of stay in that area, just to kind of help clarify that for me.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. That is true, which I mean, it makes sense for folks to have this understanding of like, oh, like this cruelty is not going to stop. This is obviously like the conditions that they want us in forever. And to say no and besides just jumping off of the boats in resistance, there were a lot of different ways that people resisted in deciding, of course, to take their own lives or to starve. Like a hunger strike essentially. But there were a lot of folks who, I mean, you also have to think about the fact that a lot of the people that were taken, their villages were attacked and burned, I'm sure multiple of their family members died in like those scrimmages of them being taken and things like that. So these are people who are going through like this PTSD level shock, right? Like they might have just lost everything that they ever knew and are now being taken on a boat as well. So it's not really surprising. And as well as there's folks who are just murdered, just straight up murdered, right? Who decided to resist. There's like one story that I read of they would, and of course trigger warning because these things are super sad and graphic, but you know how they would take slaves to the top of the slave ship to essentially exercise them because folks being stuck in those confined spaces for a very long time would lead to muscle atrophy and things. So they would have the slaves like exercise, or enslaved people, they would have the enslaved people exercise at the top of the boat. And a lot of times they would make them dance, which is a really messed up psychological warfare kind of thing to do, to take these things that they loved, like drums and dancing, and force us to dance as a way to exercise us, right? And when they would do it with women specifically, a lot of times it was, how do I phrase this? A tactic of domination, right? And a precursor to sexual assault in a lot of cases. And so there was one woman who just refused. She refused to dance. She wasn't gonna, participate in a weird, sick foreplay for these people. And that's how it was phrased in the story. And so because she refused to do so, which was her act of resistance, she was killed. Um, and I'm pretty sure she was killed pretty graphically because they wanted to make an example out of her. And you'll see this a lot. They use our shock from seeing these extremely graphic things that we had never seen before, this psychological torture and all of these things. They use that shock to put us in a free state that makes us, in our survival, try to just go along with whatever they want, right? But yes, that is true. People did jump off of the boats. People did refuse to eat or kill themselves and things like that, which is understandable. Any other questions about slavery and the dynamics of slavery before we move on to the tribes? No? Okay. All right. So like I said, the Mbundu people, native to Angola, the word Angola comes from their word Ngola for ruler, and they founded the Ndongo Kingdom. They've had contact with the Portuguese for a very, very long time, which becomes important as we move on. So, according to the Atlas of the Transatlantic Slave Trade, the Mbundu were one of the most enslaved tribes. Their kingdom was constantly antagonized by the Portuguese, and at one point, there were around 10,000 enslaved people being taken out of Angola each year, with many of them being Mbundu. And then we have an example of some traditional Mbundu wear, the Besangana. Besangana means blessed lady in Kumbundu. So this garment is specifically a women's garment. And so you can see like her sash going to the side, her cap, and then the underdress that she's wearing. Uh, One of the most famous rulers of the Ndongo Kingdom was Queen Nzinga, and we're about to go into her life a little bit more. She was actually the ruler of Ndongo and a neighboring kingdom, Matamba, and she was known for her political cleverness and negotiation skills. So, Queen Nzinga was born in 1583 to the royal family of the Mbundu Kingdom, Ndongo. Um, Basically, when she was about 10 years old, her grandfather died, and so her father ascended to the throne. And because she was a girl, she was not eligible to take on the throne, which actually allowed her father to give her kind of more attention than he normally would for children who were like competing for the throne. So he spent a lot of time with her. He would take her to political meetings with him. She's just sitting there absorbing all of that. He trained her in military combat and how to use the battle axe, which is a very common weapon in the Ndongo Kingdom. And so she really just got to learn all of these different skills because she actually wasn't eligible for the throne. And then when she was in her 30s, her father passed away, and her brother ascended the throne and became the Angola. And when he became the Angola, he immediately wanted to go to war with the Portuguese, which would backfire on him because he did not have all of this political prowess that she had, this expertise, and even the military skill. And so he was getting his butt whooped, for lack of a better word. And he was getting whooped so bad that he called on Queen Nzinga to help him negotiate and end the battles with the Portuguese. So she said yes, and she decided to meet with them in the city of Luanda, which is the capital of Angola today. And she made a very intentional effort to wear her traditional wear to this meeting, which at the time some of the African rulers had already started adopting European wear for these types of meetings and things. So it was a political statement in itself, right? So she gets to Luanda and she's coming to this meeting. And when she gets to the meeting, all of the European leaders are sitting in chairs, and for her, they have just a mat on the floor. And, I do want to state that there's nothing wrong with sitting on a mat for a political meeting. African leaders did so for thousands of years. But there's a difference between doing that traditionally and everybody else having a chair and you sitting on a mat. You know, they were obviously trying to literally make her feel lower than them, right? And in order to resist that, I guess, her assistant at the time, refused to let them do that to her. And so I don't know if it was a man or a woman, but they literally formed themselves into a chair for her to sit on. So that's what the picture is. I don't know if you guys can see it on the presentation. But they literally like got on their like all fours and formed themselves into a chair so that Queen Nzinga could sit and have this meeting. And generally, the Portuguese were very impressed with like her negotiation skills, her intelligence. And so the negotiations went really well. And, she went home with this like new reputation as well. Um, so for a while, things were really good. And then a neighboring kingdom started to attack Ndongo. And at the same time, the Portuguese went back on all of the treaties that they had established and started attacking them again as well. So now Ndongo is getting attacked from both sides, and these political conditions basically caused her brother to become very, very depressed, and just completely give up his political duties. He kind of gave up. And so a little time later, he ends up passing away, and she becomes the uh, Ngola of Ndongo. And so when she became Angola, she continued to fight the Portuguese. She took over the neighboring kingdom of Matamba. She married uh, another leader from a neighboring kingdom, I believe Mbangala. And yeah, basically her political career was very successful, right? But it's really interesting because while she's this great example of a powerful African queen, she's also, in a sense, a controversial figure because she did use slaves as a negotiation tactic. Like I had mentioned in the beginning, when the Portuguese are like, hey, we're gonna continue attacking you, or you could give us X amount of people, there are times that she took the deal and gave them a certain amount of people. And then there's times as well where she used resistance and revolt as her own tactic, right? So an example of that is at one point she, I guess, was kind of losing to the Portuguese and had to rethink her battle strategy. And so she sent out messages to all of the Mbundu people who had already been enslaved and were working on the Portuguese plantations in Angola. And she essentially asked them all to revolt at the same time. And they did that. And it caused the Portuguese to be weakened so much that she was able to temporarily, because the Portuguese always come back, but defeat them within her lifetime, and stop the conflict. So it's just really interesting how, again, she's both like this strong figure, but also is controversial and has to reckon with the actions of selling people, right? And the reason that I like talking about her is because some Black Americans, as well as Brazilians, have found DNA connections to her and, doing DNA testing and stuff. They have found that they're related to her, which is really, really cool. And so if you guys do DNA testing at any point and you see her name pop up, now you know who it is, where she's from, all that good stuff. And so, yeah, I just think it's really interesting that her lineage literally continues to live on today. And here are some alternate name spellings of her name. With a lot of the tribes and the folks that we talk about in this presentation, you'll see alternate name spellings because they're trying to translate non-English languages into the English alphabet, right? So yeah, that's Queen Nzinga. And I also want to discuss the Mbundu and their influence on capoeira. If you're not super familiar with capoeira, it is a dance martial art from Brazil. It's very popular and well known. But again, if you're not familiar, go look at videos because it's really, really cool. And a lot of Mbundu people, like a very, very large amount, were taken to Brazil. And so they helped influenced the creation of capoeira, which actually used to be called brincar de Angola or playing Angola in Portuguese, which shows that oral history, right? And the Mandinka also helped create the dance style, I believe, as well as the Bakongo. And some Black American dance moves, break dance moves like the windmill and things like that actually were inspired by capoeira. So showing how that continued lineage spread even to the United States is pretty cool. The next tribe that we are going to talk about are the Yoruba people. I could talk about the Yoruba all day. They have such beautiful traditions, amazing culture of textiles and pottery, and as you can see, some examples of some masks as well. Yeah, just really amazing. Musically, there's so many folks who are descended from Yoruba people. In America, in the Caribbean, in Brazil, you can just see their influence in a lot of different places. So they are one of the largest ethnic groups in Nigeria. So as more Nigerian immigrants have come to the United States, a lot of them are either Yoruba or Igbo. So if you're talking to a Nigerian person, they say that, now you know. And they are also located in Benin, Togo, Ghana, and other West African countries. And you can see, I hope you guys can see the map of where the Yoruba are located, and you can see them mostly in Nigeria, but also spreading into Benin and Togo, and so on and so forth. They are that lime green color on the map. And so, like I said, they have a very intricate textile, sculpture, poetry, law, and spiritual culture. Their language is Yoruba. I want to go through some of the pictures on here. So the first picture is just some really beautiful pottery. And the thing that's really beautiful about a lot of African pottery is that it includes a lot of narratives and storytelling in it. So this, I'm sure, is no different and probably is representing a whole story, oral tradition that I'm sure somebody could tell you. But very, very cool. And then the next one, I think, is a really beautiful example of kind of more realistic bronze work that is present in Africa. I'm sure you guys, well, some folks have heard of the Benin bronzes, which are some really, really beautiful sculptures that are currently in the British Museum, and folks have been fighting to get them back to Africa. And like the Benin bronzes, this is a very good example of the fact that African people are capable of doing realistic artworks, right? We choose to do more abstract and expressive, stylized works, like in the first picture, the pottery work. We choose those compositions, but we are also very capable of doing realistic artwork as well. And so then that makes you understand, like, okay, so why is someone making these choices? What are they trying to convey? And usually the answer is a spiritual element, something beyond just our world, something that can only be embodied through stylization, through art, right? And I can go deeper into that if you guys want me to. But and then in the next picture, we have an example of them using indigo. If you didn't know, indigo stems from Africa, and using it in clothes and all that stuff, it does require certain scientific knowledge, right? Because the dye has to be alkaline in a certain way in order for the indigo to actually stay. Um, and a lot of people don't know this, but indigo is the reason that blue jeans are blue. So you can see the African influence in us helping create
Went
these,
out.
because I don't think a white man uh would have figured that out. I really don't. And then in the next picture, this is the one that shows like this long robe kind of structure. This is called an Egungun masquerade. And Egungun means ancestor. So these folks are dressed up as their ancestors, and each of these cloths are these really elaborate depictions of their family legacy, maybe different like totems that are important to their families and things like that, or certain stories. And I just think it's really, really beautiful because these are super intricate. I don't even want to call them costumes, but I don't have a better word in English. But really intricate costumes that have like multi layers. And when they spin, you can see even more layers under the first one. And they have these like beautiful, kind of like boxy, almost stage curtain type shapes. It's just like such a beautiful composition, so intricate. And then you can also see the textile influence in things like carnival costumes and stuff like that. A lot of our traditions in Louisiana and their carnival costumes, but also in the Caribbean as well. You can see a lot of really, really similar textile work. Um, and then that top last picture are some drums that are common in Yoruba culture. I believe the small one is called a tuntun drum, and it's used to help kind of create a conversation between the different drums. It's like a call and response, which is really cool. Okay, so the Yoruba people's influence on language and music. So the Yoruba language is tonal and poetic. Let me drink my tea a little. So what I mean by this is the Yoruba language is a tonal language. And what that means is that a lot of the words are very small. Think one, two, three letters, right? But they are tonal in the sense that whether you go up or down in tone changes the entire meaning of the word. So, like, the word ori means head, right? But if I say ori versus ori, that's two different words. One of them might mean head, the other one means bird, like totally different based on the tones of the language, right? And so that's why you'll see with a lot of Yoruba words, they have accent marks, and those accent marks are extremely important. Another tonal language is Mandarin. It works in a very similar way, where if you are going down, it's completely different meaning than if you're going up. And so that allows for a lot of like double entendres and poetry, but it also makes me think about how those tones and those ways of talking influence our way of talking today, African American vernacular and the certain inflections and tones that we say. Because when you listen to a Yoruba person talk, it's very expressive and almost musical, right? And I think that the way that African American people speak and just Black diasporic people speak is very expressive and tonal as well. So Oriki, going to the next bullet point, Oriki is a Yoruba praise poetry that shows the importance of music and wordplay as a spiritual practice. It includes clever double meanings, repetitive phrases, and a call and response. So I think that this is a really great example of the fact that there's no separation in African cultures between music and play and worship, right? Which is something that continues even into Black churches today. Our praise dancing and the way that we even like, preach in church and stuff like that is very unique to our white counterparts, right? And those things come from this mix between our African cultures and our Christian spirituality. And a lot of those things do come from the Yoruba culture, especially. Um, if you guys aren't super familiar with call and response, I think it's pretty simple, one person saying something and then the crowd responding in a certain way. But that also plays even into dance, which is going to go into the next point. But even in the way that we dance, it's a call and response to music, right? And the way that we play music is a call and response, each of the instruments almost having this like conversation. And that's not something that's present in everybody's culture. I think that's uh, very prominent and very specific in a lot of African cultures. So going to the next bullet point, the Bata dance. It shows the origins of many of our dance moves, such as footwork, waist isolations, and is traditionally used to praise Shango. So I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the Orisa. We'll get a little bit into the Orisa in the next slide, but Shango is an Orisa. And so this dance, and even there are orikis for each of the Orisa as well. So again, showing us using music and dance and playfulness as a way to praise. So in Yoruba music, the drums also follow a call and response, making for intricate beats. And that's something that continues in our culture today, right? The intricacies of our music. A lot of that is present in the Yoruba culture as well. So, the Yoruba religion is called Isheshe in their language and focuses on powerful spirits called the Orisa. Isheshe literally translates to tradition or our way of life. And I think it's really interesting that it's called that for them because it just shows how integral it is in everything that they do. It's not like the religion or the only way. It's literally just like, this is how we live. This is how we live every day. Um, and so in Nigeria, it's called Isese. Um, a lot of folks outside of Nigeria will just call it like Yoruba spirituality. And then in the Americas, when as they had to hide their practices, the way that they did so is they hid them behind Catholic saints, which is called syncretism, which is basically combining two things. So as they were hiding them behind the Catholic saints, those things became Santeria, Umbanda, and Candomblé. So those are three Black diasporic incarnations, versions of Yoruba spirituality. So if you've heard the word Santeria, I don't practice Santeria. That's where that's from. That's what Santeria is. Um, and so these practices continue to be extremely popular in the Caribbean, South America, and North America. Um, so getting into the Orisa, there are a lot of folks who are very familiar with them. There's a lot of folks who have no idea who they are, which is totally fine. The Orisa are essentially some of them are actual like gods. So some of them are like the creator god or the god who made mankind and the earth. But most of them, once you get after those first two, they were all like real people who lived so deeply in their purpose and their path that they ascended into almost a sort of like saints or like angels is a great way to think about them, right? The same way that saints, ascend to sainthood by being so deeply in their path, that's what the Orisa are as well. And so breaking down the word Orisa, the first part, ori, it does mean head, like I mentioned earlier. And what they mean by that, your head, your crown, is essentially the path and purpose that you were born with. And so before when you're learning about Yoruba spirituality, before you deal with any of the Orisa or anything like that, the first thing that you're always required to do is to get right with yourself and get right with your inner path and your inner voice. And so again, that's what the Orisa followed. They followed so deeply in their path, that inner voice, that purpose that they ascended. So going into some of the Orisa, there's Shango, who is the god of lightning and thunder. He's also the god of drums because you think about the sound of drums and the sound of thunder, very similar, right? And a lot of people like him because he's kind of an archetype of like masculinity. You see him in the first picture, he's like shirtless and strong and all of that, right? But I think also the really interesting thing that you learn about as you learn about Yoruba spirituality and culture is that their ideas of masculinity are so different from ours, right? There's some examples of Shango wearing something that almost looks like a crop top, right? Because their ideas of like Western fashion are not the same, not present, right? Um, and I also want to say that a lot of the Orisa are kind of non-binary because they represent an energy at this point. They don't even have a physical body anymore. So they can be kind of non-binary, meaning they're like not necessarily men or women. And they also can come as many different forms. So there's different uh, versions of all of them depending on the type of energy that you're interacting with. But then there's Obatala. Obatala is a great example of an Orisa who's depicted in a very non-binary way. Their face is usually covered, as you can see. They're the one wearing white, and they're always wearing a white robe with a staff. So there's some depictions of them as a woman, some depictions of them as a man, sometimes very ambiguous. And they were the creator of the world and humans. And then next is Oshun. She's the goddess of rivers and fertility. She is depicted often in like yellow or gold. And she's known for like sweetness, like honey, right? So a lot of times when people are looking to sweeten their relationships and things like that, or fertility, they might talk to her. And then there's a lot more. There's Yemaya. She is the Orisa of the ocean, the mother of many. There's Elegba, who is the Orisa of communication and opening doorways. We'll talk more about him a little bit later. Um, and then there's also the tradition of Ifa. Ifa is a divination system which includes complex math and poetry and also interacts with the Orisa. So the way that Ifa works is like a very blanket summary. Is you go to get a reading, and basically they have like these really beautiful trays, these really intricate trays, and they throw down kola nuts. Kola nuts are really significant in a lot of West African cultures. And the way that the kola nuts fall basically coincides with a certain poem that they have memorized. And so, like, the poem, there's like over 400 poems, and they have like a complex math system to decide which poem is the right one. So it's a lot of responsibility to know and remember all of these things, you know. And then they give you a reading of basically like kind of what's going to happen in your life, what kind of sacrifices you need to make in order to make things go the way that you want them to. And I know a lot of people get scared because they imagine that these sacrifices are like, oh, you know, always animals or things like that. A lot of people practice in a lot of different ways. I won't say that there aren't people who do that. But there are also a lot of people who don't. And so the sacrifices that you need to make are sometimes like waking up early in the morning or cutting out red meat or, you know, these things that you would have to kind of sacrifice anyway in order to just live a better life. Um, but that's kind of a general understanding of what Ifa is. And there's a lot of people who still practice Ifa in the United States today. And the people who practice Ifa are called Babalaos. That's like the priests of Ifa. Before we get too deep into the Igbo people, I wanted to know if anybody had questions.
This is Juan. I don't have a question, but I have an observation. Um, I actually did my DNA results,
Mm-hmm.
and according to according to the results, I have 25%, and I may not be pronouncing this right, but you mentioned it earlier, the Benin,
Benin? Mm-hmm.
yes, and the Togo.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that interesting because you talked about
Yeah, Benin and Togo, right? I also
yes.
have Benin and Togo in my DNA, and I was like, I don't know who that is
Oh,
or what.
right, exactly. So that and the rest, we'll talk about later. But that got my attention.
Yeah, and you'll hear them a couple more times, you know, a couple other tribes that also are from Benin and Togo. So
Yeah.
keep an ear out. Did anybody have any questions about the Orisa and like that spiritual practice as well? No? Okie dokie. Okay, so going into the Igbo people. So this is another very large ethnic group in Nigeria. Like I said, a lot of Nigerian immigrants coming into the United States are either going to be Yoruba or Igbo. They could be other tribes too, but those are the very, very large majority. The Igbo are located more in the south. And they were some of the first bronze workers in Africa. Just like many of the other tribes we talk about, they have a vibrant culture of clay, bronze, masks, costumes, textiles, architecture, philosophy, and more. So, you know, these tribes, you can dive into their culture for like days and days and days. And I highly suggest it because they're all really interesting. And I think they help kind of inform you on how to live better, how the world can be, and all those cool things. Their language is Igbo. So, some ways that you can see the influence of Igbo people in the Americas is especially through language. The word okra actually comes from Igbo. The original word is okwuru, and you can see how that phonetically would become okra over time through oral tradition, right? So, imagine being a little kid and you hear somebody say okwuru, and you're like, okra? Because that's exactly what happened. And then the Igbo language and African American vernacular have essentially the same grammar rules. And this is also something that's present in Yoruba as well. Of course, with Yoruba and Igbo people being neighbors, their language is pretty similar. And sometimes they can even understand each other. And I actually got to study Yoruba for 2 years at Howard, and this is one of the first things that I noticed, being one of the only African Americans in the class, was how much African American vernacular and their grammar rules were similar. So, one of the ways that they're similar, which is what this chart is showing, is in English, we have connecting verbs. A connecting verb is like is, are, were. So he is sick. We don't say he's sick. We say he is sick in standard English. But in African American vernacular, he would just say he's sick. And it's the same exact way in Igbo and Yoruba. As you can see, on that second line, it's not o di aria oria, so that D is their equivalent to is. It's just o na aria oria. So he's sick. Another way that you can see this is that Yoruba and Igbo, their verbs don't have conjugations. So a conjugation is, I'm trying to think of a good verb. So I swim, he swims, she swims, they swim, right? The fact that we don't say he swim, she swim, we say swims, we add the S. That's a conjugation of a verb. In African American vernacular, you can say he swim, she swim, as especially if you're talking about in general, like as a habitual thing, like, oh, he's always swimming, he swim. And in Yoruba and Igbo, it's the same way. They don't have those conjugations of the verb. It's literally just he swim, she swim, they swim. So that's really cool. And as you get deeper into the languages, you can see some of those similarities continue to come up in their grammar. These are some examples of Igbo bronzes, and the really cool fact about these is they did not use soldering, so all of the pieces that you're seeing were cast as one piece, which is like really crazy. Like the one where it looks like ropes going around it, like imagining them doing that all as one piece, or even adding like the handles and things like that. It's just really, really cool to imagine how they did that. And then towards the bottom right corner, I show an example of Ichi, which is their tradition of scarification. Scarification is present in a lot of West African cultures. The Yoruba do scarification as well, usually about like 3 lines down the face, 2 or 3. But this one is really, really intricate, and it's really cool that you can see an example of the facial scarification in the pendant next to it. So showing this tradition being depicted in their art style as well. And another cool thing about this is that his facial scarification in this picture is showing that he is a part of the esteemed Nze na Ozo society. And so this brings up a conversation about how in a lot of African cultures, it's very traditional for the adults to all be a part of essentially kind of like a secret society within the village. And so basically what would happen was, as kids go into, adolescence, teenagehood and whatnot, they would be taken through these like rites of passage, a lot of them physical, some of them like, can you keep certain secrets or display certain qualities and things like that. And then once they pass all those tests, they become members of the essentially the adult society within their village, right? It's kind of like being initiated into being allowed in grown folks' business. And so I also think it's really cool because, obviously, Black fraternities and sororities are really important in African American culture. And so it makes me think about how those Black fraternities and sororities are kind of a ancestral pulling towards those same kind of secret societies that we did traditionally, which I think is really, really cool. So next we have the Bakongo people. I'm going to go through this tribe and then we can ask some questions about both of the tribes. The Bakongo are located in Central Africa, mostly in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of Congo, Angola, and Gabon. So moving a little bit down on the map, and they founded the Congo Kingdom. They were one of the earliest tribes to trade with the Portuguese. And they have several subgroups, which include the Bwende, Vili, Sundi, Yombe, and their language is Kikongo. So you guys could look at the map really quickly, an example of some of their dances and masquerades, and then an actual picture of a citizen of the Congo Kingdom. Awesome. So I think Bakongo spirituality is something that we really carried with us, especially as African Americans. I think that Yoruba spirituality especially survived in the Caribbean and Brazil. Not to say that it didn't come here as well, but there's a large majority, and you can see it because of the popularity of certain. But the Bakongo spirituality a little bit. Sorry, friend. The Bakongo spirituality is a little bit more flexible, a little bit more vague. And so I think that's why people think that African Americans don't have like spiritual traditions, but in reality, our spiritual traditions are just a little bit less structured because the Yoruba spiritual structure is like it's firm. Like you go through a specific process, it takes a certain amount of time, you have to do certain things. But Congo spirituality is like a little more fluid, right? So yeah, I think people mistaken that, but I think that we did carry it with us. And something that's really cool about the Bakongo creation story is that it aligns almost exactly with the Big Bang Theory. So, in the Bakongo creation story, everything starts with Mbungi, which is the lifeless void. And then there's the Kalunga, which essentially the creator summoned a great fire called the Kalunga. So imagine big explosion, right? The Kalunga heats up the contents of the void. Then the matter in the void cools down and the earth is formed. And at first, the earth was hot and molten and then the earth cooled down, and then the earth was able to become green with vegetation. They include all of those steps in their creation story, which is so cool because that means that we had an understanding of how the universe and the world came to be thousands of years before Western scientists. Some other aspects of Bakongo spirituality are the Dikenga cross, which is that first picture, also known as the Yowa, which shows the cycle of life. This is one of the things that I learned at Howard. And it basically shows the rising and setting of the sun also as a metaphor for life. And the four elements. So the first one that you start with is at the bottom, Musoni or air. And this is when a baby is being created in the womb. And then you go to the next one, which was so going in through the spring season into Kala, which is fire, that's birth. And then going into summer and the earth elements, Tekula, which is essentially life and, action, adolescence, maturing. And then finally you go into the fall, which is Lavemba, and then winter, which would be like death. So spring, birth, summer, maturity, fall, like continued maturity, and then winter as death, right? And something that's really cool about this that some of my Native American friends who attended the lecture pointed out to me was that it also shows the four directions, which are very significant and important in Native American culture as well, which is really cool because something that I've learned as an Afro-Indigenous person is just how many parallels Native American and African culture have naturally because we were both basically like natural scientists. Like we cared about nature and the earth, and that's what we learned from. And so naturally, like we came to a lot of the same conclusions, which is very cool. Um, and then additionally, Bakongo's spiritual principles deeply align with the principles of hoodoo. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with hoodoo, but there's a big difference between hoodoo and voodoo. We will go into what voodoo is in the next couple of slides, but voodoo is a very specific tradition. It works with some very like powerful spirits and things like that, similar to the Orisa, but I like to think of it more as like blood and bone, like really intense magic. It can be really intense. And then hoodoo is essentially black herbalism. Hoodoo is, it doesn't worship a specific spirit or anything like that. It's more about energy. It's again more about medicine. And hoodoo is so present in everything that we do as African Americans. Um, I'm trying to think of some really good examples for you guys. For instance, a hoodoo tradition is sweeping the floor every morning from the back of the house out the front doorway. In a lot of southern places, you would see folks doing that every morning. I'm sure, I'm sure you guys have witnessed that as well. And so that sweeping of the floor, that is a cleansing of energy in the house, right? We're moving the energy out of the house each day so that we can start anew. Red brick dust, laying red brick dust at the front of your house is a hoodoo tradition. Having a lucky rabbit's foot, that comes from hoodoo. Let's see what else. Burning certain herbs and things like that. Um, some other things are like, so if you had a store and you wanted to attract more customers, what some folks would do is take like a silver coin and lay a silver coin in every corner of the store. I believe with some brick dust as well, but y'all gotta fact check me on that. And so that would like be kind of a little charm to bring in more customers. Blowing cinnamon out of your front door or into your bedroom in order to attract money or sensuality. Mojo bags, little medicine bags that include like kind of charmed herbs and prayers and intention in them, and then carrying that with you, right? So all of these things where it's like I said, it's not a specific deity or anything like that that they're praising, but they're doing this work with herbs and medicine and all of those things. I think everything from you like Vicks Vapor Rub to ginger ale to honey and lemon, like all of these things are hoodoo. And so a lot of that we do carry with us. And a lot of what Bakongo spirituality is that understanding that everything in the world is sacred, all the plants, all the animals, all the people, understanding the sacredness of that and understanding the medicine of that too, like having these reciprocal relationships with nature, offering gifts to nature, our time, our energy, and then receiving medicine in return. All of that is very aligned with Bakongo spirituality. And then we're going to get into slavery for the Bakongo Empire. like I said, the Bakongo people were the earliest in Africa to welcome and trade with the Portuguese. They were allies with them for a very long time. But when slavery started, the Portuguese began taking Congo people, regardless of the fact that they were allies. And the ruler of the Congo Kingdom literally had to beg them to stop, which of course they said no to. And they pressured him, and he was forced to accept the taking of Congo people. So, below you see the letter that Mwene Congo Alfonso I sent to the King of Portugal, begging him to stop the kidnappings. And you can find translations of this letter online, and it's really interesting because, I mean, it's sad, honestly, just kind of watching him deal with the confusion of them suddenly taking all these people, like taking them in the night, literally. He's like, my chiefs and my scholars and my, politicians are disappearing. Their sons are disappearing. Like, why is this happening? What are y'all doing? Can you please stop? And they basically told him, no, we're not going to stop, and we're going to keep taking like really important political people unless you give us other people to take. And so that's basically the kind of negotiation that he had to make. And I'm sure he was trying to self-preserve and maintain the cultural fabric of his society and his kingdom, right? But then it's like now you have to sell people in the process, which is just a really sucky choice to have to make. And there's a picture of Mwene Congo Alfonso I. So before we get into the phone, people, do we have any questions, statements, observations? Okay. All right. So next we're gonna get into the phone people. The phone people are found in Benin, and Nigeria and Togo. They had a kingdom called the Dahomey Kingdom. And if you've ever heard of the Dahomey Warriors, this is who they're from. So the Dahomey Warriors, also known as the Dahomey Amazons in English, were called the Mino in their language, and they were an all-female squadron of warriors. Um, and I'm sure they very much impressed Europeans because Europeans were like, oh my God, women being strong, fighting, all of that. But yeah, they were really cool. You can see a picture of them on the slide. And yeah, there's something else I was gonna say, but I don't. So the Fawn are the originators of Voodoo, also known as voodoo. Um, so before we get too deep into like what voodoo is, the original word is voodoo, and the spelling of voodoo with the double O's, that can only really refer to the Louisiana practice of voodoo, but voodoo in like Haiti or in Benin and things like that, they prefer this spelling with the N at the end. And so, like I said, we know what hoodoo is at this point. Voodoo, on the other hand, or voodoo, it focuses more on interacting with very specific spirits. Instead of the orisa, they have what are called loa, but it's kind of the same concept of like these deities or spirits that they interact with. And of course, voodoo throughout our mainstream media and everything has been depicted always as like this really dark black magic. But in reality, it's a complex spiritual system, just like any other. It can be used to ensure good rains for the year or pray for someone's health, just as it can be used for dark purposes as well. Um, the spirituality has spread all throughout the Caribbean, concentrating especially in Haiti and Trinidad, where a lot of Fon people went. And through trade between Haiti and Louisiana as French colonies, the practice spread to New Orleans. Some really interesting things are that I believe the Fon people, going back like thousands and thousands and thousands of years, were originally Yoruba people and another ethnic group. I'm not sure which one. And so some Yoruba people branched off. Maybe they disagreed with a leader or certain, migration choice or something like that. And then they joined with some other folks and became their own ethnic group over, 1,000 years. And so when you're looking at the Loa in Vudun, one of the people that they have in common, who we're going to talk about some more, is Elegba. Like I said, Elegba is the Orisa of communication, crossroads. He is who you talk to in order to talk to any other Orisa. He's like the operator, right? So like when you're doing worship with the Orisa, you have to ask Elegba to open the way of communication for you to talk to anybody else. And so it's really interesting that Elegba shows up both in the Orisa spirituality and Yoruba spirituality and in Vodun as well. In Vodun, he's Papa Legba. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah. We're going to get into the Mandinka people. So the Mandinka we're going a little bit more north now, located in Mali, Guinea, and many other West African countries. They are
I
also
have
known.
a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I've been meaning to chime in from the other ones.
Hmm.
So I guess I'm wondering when I hear all this voodoo and hoodoo and all those different dudes, I'm wondering, so when did this whole Christianity thing kick in?
Um, well, I do want to state that Christianity existed in Africa, specifically in Ethiopia, which is East Africa, not near West Africa at all. Um, since its incarnation. The Ethiopians are Abrahamic people as well, I believe. And so they speak Aramaic, which is what Jesus spoke. And they're related to that whole bloodline, Judaism, all of those things, right? So Christianity was already present in Africa, not in West Africa so much. As folks started to trade with the Portuguese, like the Bakongo, um, they were baptized, like Queen Azinga was baptized, but she wasn't actually a practicing Christian. She just got baptized as like a political move. Like they were like, okay, we'll stop attacking you if you get baptized. He was like, I'll get baptized. So there were people in Africa who knew what Christianity was, but they weren't really like practicing it very deeply. Christianity didn't really become introduced to us as like a deep spiritual tradition until slavery. Um, and so through slavery, one of the really big ways that they were able to convert us, obviously through force, giving us Christian names and clothes and making the Bible the only book that we were allowed to have, making churches the only space that we were allowed to play our music, to congregate, and all those things. So with that, Christianity became our meeting place a lot of times. And as we even became emancipated, it became our way into creating viable careers for ourselves, right? Because at this point, it was so important to our cultural structure that you'll see a lot of the very successful people and families in the Reconstruction era, once we were free, were preachers and pastors. Even Howard University was like originally a divination college. So that was the only way that we were really able to access education for a very, very long time. And the same thing happened in Africa, as going into the 17 and 1800s, as they started to specifically, they had already been taking people from Africa, right? But in the 17 and 1800s, you see, what is it called? Um, it's essentially a land grab of the European powers to Africa. There's a specific name for it. I can't remember right now. But as they started grabbing for land in Africa specifically, that's when they started going really hard on the missionary work and converting people. And a lot of times they did convert us through
I'm doing pretty good, and you, partner?
torture and things like that. So, we didn't really start practicing Christianity by choice, but it did become the means for our cultural practices and preservation in a lot of ways. So it's very significant to our culture, at this point. I hope that answers your question.
You did, and I'm happy you cleared that up because when I did watch something on Maxine had told me about um TBS, right? I think it was TBS, one of those shows during COVID, and they had mentioned about like how, you know, preferably like the Bible was given to us to, and that's why they tore out certain pages of the Bible so we as slaves could, just always say, like they was to keep us as slaves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And and if you continue to mirror history now and learn, when you notice whenever the slave owners felt like the slaves were getting ready to take over, they would go to the British, right? And then get information on how to, then that's when they started thinking of the Willie Lynch and like getting in our mind instead of beating us and so forth. And so yeah, it's just now that I hear you, because a lot of the things that they try to tell us about, the voodoo, of course, is all bad. I only know that through I'm a northerner, right? So I'm from East Coast, right? So I didn't, we always thought we was free, right? And so, yeah, it's just, yeah, you cleared that up. Like you helped me put the association because I think as I try to understand all these I'm not hearing anything from you already on number 6 and I ain't hear you say anything about Christianity until I just asked that question. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, yeah, we were not Christian. And even now, when you look at Christianity in a lot of these countries, it's very Africanized Christianity, right? Like they're very gung-ho about Jesus because the missionaries, they're good at what they do and they've been doing it for a long time. But yeah, the way that they practice, the dances, the singing, the boisterous music and all of those things, those are so African in tradition, right? Um, so what's really interesting is we're about to get into Islam in Africa, which was present for a lot longer, with the Mandinka people. So the Mandinka are located in Mali, Guinea, and many other West African countries. They are also known as the Malinke or the Mandinga. They have a reputation for being very strong, which even followed them across the Atlantic. And in the Americas, Mandinka became known to mean a tall, strong black person. So if you've ever heard the word like Mandingo and things like that, that's where it comes from. It comes from the Mandinka people and their reputation for being like these strong, tall, beautiful African people. The Mandinka founded the Mali Empire, which was extremely rich. Um, so here are some examples of like their cultural traditions. You can see the first woman using henna, which is popular in a lot of the Muslim world, her beautiful gold jewelry and accessories. And then that next picture is some Mandinka architecture. And I love thinking about the communal aspect of building that house together and decorating that house together as a family, especially with the little family sitting in front of it. And then that last one, you can see another example of a woman using indigo in her textiles and stuff. And I love that picture of that last girl because honestly, she looks like so many African American people that I know, just in her face, her cute nose. Love her. So the Mali Empire existed in Africa for about 400 years. They were Muslim, and their city Timbuktu was known as a great city for learning and trade. Scholars from all over the world came to study here. So talking a little bit about Islam in Africa. Islamic traders and folks who essentially wanted to convert others came into Northern Africa much earlier than Christianity. Because when you think about Christianity, the Catholic Empire, once they were established, was much more focused on colonizing Europe, right? France and England and Germany, that's where their focus was at. But the Arabs were colonizing this way and then down, right? So they were more focused on, again, North Africa. That's why North Africa is very, very largely Muslim. And then through that, it started spreading downward. And I won't lie, a lot of those conversions were violent. They were through war and conquering and things like that. And there was an Islamic and Arabic slave trade, and you guys can look into that as well. But like I said, the difference, even though there definitely were cruelties and all of those things like that, and nobody should be taking slaves, right? The difference is that with the Islamic slave trade, again, as folks converted to Islam, they were allowed to be full-fledged citizens. And so we gained access to a lot of like knowledge and information in the Islamic world. Because while Europe was going through the Dark Ages, the Islamic world was like amazing when it came to scholarly practices. Like I said, they were doing astronomy, math, philosophy, poetry. Like they had a very large scholarly tradition spreading all the way to Mongolia. So we then gained access to like all of this information going all the way through to Mongolia, which is huge, right? It's like a very large portion of the world. And so yeah, so the Mali Empire is an example of a traditionally Islamic empire. One of the most famous rulers, I'm sure some of you have heard of him, was Mansa Musa. So Mansa Musa is the most famous ruler of the Mali Empire by far, and he was the richest person to ever live. His wealth would be equivalent to $400 billion today. During his life, he made the trip to Mecca, which is the holy city in Islam, and this trip is called a Hajj. Every Muslim is supposed to make a Hajj journey at least once in their life. And so during his Hajj, he carried with him elephants and gold and like a giant entourage. So, of course, everywhere he's going, and you can see his route on the map, that's the dotted line. Everywhere he's going, he's catching a lot of attention, and people are like, "Where are you from?" And so that's how a lot of the world learned about Timbuktu, and it became like a very well-known city. And that's why Europeans will say, like, "Oh, all the way to Timbuktu," because it just seems so far to them. But that's how they learned where Timbuktu even was. Um, and so we're going to talk about his father, Abu Bakr II. Um, I love talking about this because there's so much misinformation on the internet about this man right now. A lot of people think that Mansa Musa made this journey to the Americas, and then there's even like these conspiracy theories that like, oh, he conquered the Americas, or the Native Americans weren't even here, and we did this and that. I don't know. It's a hot mess express. But in reality, he never journeyed to America at all. His father did. So his father, Abu Bakr II, was never the ruler of the Mali Empire, based on records that they found and oral accounts and things like that, which means that his father probably was, and so he just never ascended to the throne, or maybe an uncle, or things like that. But he still would have been a very like prominent, rich political figure in the Mali Empire. And so he was set on finding the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. And so around 1312, he took 200 well-crafted ships and enough provisions to last for years, and did that. He set off into the Atlantic Ocean, and he landed into the Americas. And we know this because they found examples of African spearheads and medals and things like that in the Caribbean when Christopher Columbus came. And Christopher Columbus and other explorers as well do mention finding obviously mixed Afro-Indigenous people when they got there already. Not super commonly, but they did exist and were already there. And so we don't know why he never returned to Mali, but one of the theories is basically that there is a current that goes from Africa straight to the Americas, super highway across the ocean, but it only goes in one direction. So what probably happened is that his fleet of ships hit that current, and they all like went like that, but then they couldn't make it back. And one of the ships in his fleet actually turned around before they hit that current and kind of confirmed that that's what happened. And they were like, "Yeah, I didn't go that far. I got scared." But yeah, so he never returned to Mali, and he most likely traded and lived his life with the native people of the Americas, and probably died there. So, some Mandinka cultural elements, and you can see a lot of this in African American culture today. Um, the instrument, the kora, it's a stringed instrument made from gourd, cowskin, and hardwood neck. It sounds similar to a harp or a guitar, depending on how it's played. And kora players are called jalolu, also known as jelly. If you've ever heard the word griot, I know it's becoming kind of a more popular word to talk about. Griot is the French translation of the word, but basically, the word jelly or jalolu, and what it means is like musical storyteller. So, Jelly or Jalolu, also known as griots, are responsible for maintaining oral histories through song. Like they will literally sing you the entire history of the tribe, right? And what's really cool is they're brought in a lot of times with like negotiations. Let's say two tribes are having like a conflict or something. So the Jelly or the Jalolu will come and seeing the history of how certain conflicts were resolved in the past and things like that to kind of stimulate ideas on like how can we move past this, how can we find unity and stuff like that. So they're really, really important to the fabric of the cultures where they're present. And I learned at Howard that jelly translates to the blood. So they're literally the blood of their society. They're necessary for the life of their society. And Jali are extremely important to the Mandinka society, just like I said. They serve as musicians, poets, and historians. They're responsible for memorizing the history of their tribe. And they are oftentimes like a lineage. So your father was a Jalolu, you will be a Jalolu, and so on and so forth. Um, and other West African cultures have similar positions within their society. So yeah, you can see the Kora and what the Jalolu look like, what they wear. So Mandinka influences on our culture, a longstanding history of Islam and Islamic scholarly practice. There were enslaved people who already came to the Americas being able to read, write, do math, speak multiple languages. Strong warriors, the Mandinka were involved in early revolts, which we'll talk about as well. The banjo, the creation of the banjo kind of comes from a hybrid between the kora, which we just saw, and another instrument that looks exactly like a banjo called the akonting, which was created by a tribe in Nigeria, I believe the Igbo people. And yeah, these stringed instruments with the round body, they both, made out of hide, long neck, all of that. And then the use of oral history and storytelling through music, which of course we can see through like rap and just general Black music. We do that a lot. So yeah. And also talking about like Islam and the Islamic practice being, an influence in African American culture. A lot of our names have Arabic origins. If you have a name like Bukhari or Jakari or anything like that, that's of Arabic origin. Um, there was another one, Aisha, or any name similar to that. A lot of the Isha, like that comes from Arabic. Some other names. Jamar, Jamari, like all of those come from the Arabic language. Um, and then of course, if we have this long-standing practice of Islam, it's not surprising that something like the Nation of Islam would become very popular with African Americans, them not even realizing that they're grasping towards this ancestral memory. So very, very cool. Before we get into the Fulani, do we have any questions? Drink my water. No questions? Okay. All right, so the Fulani are a nomadic ethnic group spread across Africa with a population of 38 million people. They are often herders of sheep, goats, and other cattle, which is why they move around from pasture to pasture. If you look at the map at the bottom of the slide, you can see that entire area is where the Fulani are located. That's like basically more than half of Africa going this way. Um, and the Fulani were some of the first people in West Africa to adopt Islam, which often created tension because they were, especially with them being nomadic, were some of the folks that were violently converting people, and spreading Islam throughout Africa. And so, of course, this creates tension with tribes that are like, no, we want to practice our traditional practices. And they still have conflicts with other ethnic groups to this day, being that they're nomadic and a lot of other tribes are sedentary, which means that they don't move around. And so let's say you're a farmer who's sedentary and the Fulani are passing through your area and then their cattle happen to like eat your crops or something. That happens a lot, unfortunately. And so it does cause like conflict in a lot of African countries. And so you'll still see like tensions between Fulani people and other tribes like to this day if you get into like contemporary African politics. They're also known as the Fula, Fulbe, Pel, or Pula. And the languages that they speak are Fula, Hausa, and Arabic. Hausa is another migratory Arabic tribe. I mean, not Arabic, Islamic tribe. And I guess because they're often in such close contact and are probably a lot of like have a lot of intermingling, a lot of Fulani people also speak Hausa. And they're really cool. If you ever get to look them up, they have like really cool outfits and like horses with really elaborate outfits as well. So they're very cool to look at, the Hausa people. One thing that you'll notice about Fulani people is they accessorize. They have such beautiful hairstyles, such beautiful like beauty traditions. That was like one of the first things that I noticed about them as I was like researching more about African tribes and learning. They've got a super creative sense of fashion. So they wear their hair in a lot of really intricate styles. You can see in the middle the hairstyle that's like basically a giant loop with like little almost like micro braids or strands or something, sister locks, I don't know, like going into the crown. And then the braids on the side, braids going down, and then the accessories at the end. And some folks have heard of Fulani braids, which is a popular style of braiding in America today, where basically just like the girl to the right of the picture I was just talking about, there's a center braid going down the middle, and then you have like your braids going down the side. So that's become a really popular style now, which I think is very cool, especially since a lot of folks don't even know who the Fulani are. And then they also have these really distinct large gold hoop earrings in that first picture called biole. And they also often tattoo around the lips, which is called chudi. And I think it's really cool because obviously these large gold earrings, I think, connects to Black women's love of gold hoops. I got my hoops today. And then the darkness around the lips reminds me so much of like dark lip liner, which, I know the women in my family have been doing for a long time. And so, I think also emphasizing the beauty of like hyperpigmentation and melanin, by darkening their lips even more, is really, really cool to see. Even you see in that first picture, she got like extra ear piercing. She has a septum piercing. So we can see, the traditions of body and face piercings in our cultures, which is very, very cool. And it's really interesting as well because a lot of Fulani people can be distinguished from other tribes based on the accessories that they have on. So, of course, the biole earrings, where you see that shape that's kind of like a banana. Anytime you see that, usually it's a Fulani person wearing them. And even the woman with the crown hairstyle, her little kind of like Bobo looking accessories at the end, those orange orbs, those show specifically what subgroup of the Fulani that she is from. Another thing is that Fulani men, especially from the Wodabe subgroup, participate in beauty competitions to find partners where they wear intricate makeup, sing, and dance called Guerol. And that's that last picture. It might be blocked by folks on the screen. But you can see a man dressed for Guerol. He has paintings going down his nose. He's got darkening around his lips as well. And they will dance for like hours. They go into like a trance state, which is really interesting. But it's also really cool to see non-Western ideas of masculinity. You know, this is a beautiful, beautiful man showing his beauty in a beauty competition. And it's not weird or, the way that we would see it in Western culture. It's completely different, which is very cool. And then I also wanted to include Adlam script, which is a more contemporary creation. It was created in 1989 by brothers Ibrahim and Abdullah Bari. Adlam script is an alphabet specifically for the Fulani language. The Mandinka also did something similar because basically they were using the Arabic language to write, but the Arabic language doesn't encompass all of the sounds in their language. And so they created a new alphabet based on the Arabic language that includes some more of their traditional sounds. And something that's really cool is Adlam is actually an abbreviation for a much longer name that I'm not going to try to pronounce, which translates to the alphabet that, oh, I'm sorry, I accidentally hit my thing. The alphabet that, what is the word? Protects the people from vanishing. I just think that that's a really beautiful thing to name your alphabet. The alphabet that protects the people from vanishing. We're going to get into the Akan people next. Do we have any questions? Nope. Okay. So next are the Akan people. The Akan have a population of about 25 million at this point in time, living in Ghana, Togo, and the Ivory Coast. So mentioning Togo again. They have many subgroups, including the Bono or Abran and the Ashanti. So if you've ever heard the word Ashanti, the name Ashanti, that is where it comes from. They're a subgroup of the Akan. They have had many empires and are especially known for their abundance of gold. The Akan are matrilineal, meaning that they form families and clans around their mother's family line. And like many tribes that we mentioned, they both were taken and participated in the slave trade. So looking at the cloth that they're wearing, that orange cloth with the green, red, blue, a lot of us have seen this cloth before. We use it a lot of times in like Kwanzaa. This is called kente cloth, and kente cloth is specific to the Akan people, which is pretty cool. And then you can see all of the gold that they're wearing, the many gold accessories. One of my favorite things about the Akan people are just how much they do and have done with gold work. It's very, very cool. And then you can see the map as well of where they're at in Ghana. So the Khan were participants in rebellion a lot, specifically the Coromantes. So the Coromantes were a group of enslaved Akan people in the Caribbean, North America, and South America. They are named after Coromantse, the town that they were shipped out of in Ghana. The Coromantes a lot of them were captured soldiers. You know, a lot of the people that were taken during the slave trade were people that you had a battle, you lost, now you're taken. So these folks were trained soldiers that were taken, and with their military experience, they organized a lot of slave rebellions. And they literally organized so many rebellions across the Americas that European slave traders had to make a decree saying that they would no longer take Akan people as slaves, even though they were strong workers, because they just could not deal with the hassle. So looking at the bottom, you can see three examples of rebellions that they started, not even that far apart. The first one was the slave insurrection on St. John's Virgin Islands in 1733, then Tacky's War in Jamaica in 1760, and in 1763, only 3 years later, Berbice slave uprising in Guyana, which included 2,500 enslaved people. Very cool. And I have not fact checked this yet, so feel free to fact check it for me. But I did hear recently that they did some kind of DNA composition or something, and apparently Harriet Tubman had Akan DNA, which is really, really cool. Just imagining that continued lineage of strength and rebellion living through her as well. So some aspects of Akan culture. I really love the Adinkra symbols. The logo of my tutoring program is an Adinkra symbol. And they represent different concepts and ideas in Akan culture. They're used on cloth, home decorations, and more. And they were created in the early 1800s by the Bono subgroup. So each Adinkra symbol has a name, which they can be like really poetic, and they all represent different concepts. So the first Akan symbol on that chart at the bottom says Boa me na me mo oa wo, help me and let me help you. So obviously imagining like that reciprocity of community. Um, Esene tekra, teeth and tongue. So I believe that's like a protection one. And then there are some that are like pretty simple, like Eban, which is a fence, which would represent like security in the home. The logo to my tutoring program is Akoma Toso, which is linked hearts, which is like the strength of community. Um, so yeah, and then another really popular figure, specifically in Akan storytelling, is Anansi. He's like his own genre of stories, Anansi stories. So he's a very popular figure in Akan mythological stories. He's a spider known for being smart and clever. Almost all of his stories are him kind of outsmarting someone with like really critical thinking. And his stories have traveled across the Atlantic and continue to be told in many Caribbean countries such as Jamaica, Trinidad, Aruba, and more. That picture, I remember reading that specific book on him as a child in New York, which is really cool. Um, and it's also really interesting getting to see how his name, Anansi, traveled through oral tradition across the Caribbean. So, in Jamaica, certain areas of Jamaica, even though he's always depicted as a man, sometimes people will call him Aunt Nancy, like Aunt Nancy, because they're hearing his name verbally, Anansi, and assuming, through oral tradition that that was his name, which is pretty funny. But yeah, he's like his own genre of stories, and it's very cool to see how that oral tradition continued across the Atlantic. Here are some examples of Akan gold art. We have some rings with with Adinkra symbols on them. The double crocodiles on his finger are Funtun Funefu, Dekeyem Funefu, and it literally means like a Siamese crocodile. And the story behind that is that the two crocodiles are sharing one stomach, right? And so what they're supposed to represent is cooperation rather than being like an individualist. Because if each of the crocodiles are more concerned with like, well, I'm gonna eat, no, I'm gonna eat, they're gonna tear each other and neither of them are gonna get to eat as much. When in reality, they share a stomach. So like that shouldn't be the priority. So that's showing like how we're all connected through community. And when we try to be individualists, we're really just hurting ourselves. Another one is right below that, the bird that's facing backwards. That is the Sankofa symbol, which is one of the most popular Adinkra symbols. Sankofa means to go back and get it. And so this symbol is used to essentially say, going back to our ancestral practices and it's strengthening us. And so that's why he's facing backwards. He's going back and getting it. His traditions. Any questions before we get into the Wolof people? Oh, I see some in the chat. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, yeah. Someone said, please get the book to read to your grandchildren or share with family. Anansi the Spider by Gerald McDermott. You can order through Amazon. I agree. It's a great book. And then someone else said, blue, indigo, my favorite color, men being fashionable. A pleasure to learn more about my history. Oh, thank you. So sweet. Oh, not what I meant to do. Okay. The Wolof people, they are the largest ethnic group in Senegal, making up 39% of the population, also in Gambia and Mauritania. They are also traditionally Muslim. They founded the Jollof Empire, which lasted 540 years, ending in 1890 after the French defeated them. Europeans are relentless. I don't think it counts because they will go against every treaty that they said they will, y'all already know. Anyway, musical storytellers are also important in Wolof society. They are called Gwewel in Wolof society instead of Jelly. The Wolof are known for their iconic sky blue fabric, wrapped gold earrings, and like the Fulani, who are their neighbors, Wolof women will tattoo and put dark makeup around their lips as well. So as we've gotten more into like the contemporary age, less people are tattooing the lips and just doing the makeup traditionally. But there is still, I'm sure, older folks who still have their tattoos and stuff. Um, so that first picture, those wrapped hair accessories and earrings in that very like vibrant orange gold color, you can usually tell someone is Wolof if you see them having that hair accessory, which is again, it's so cool to be able to recognize folks just based on their accessories, right? And then that light blue fabric is also very traditional. And you see the earrings that kind of look like nuts or shells. And then the stick in her mouth. They do that a lot whenever they're in that traditional wear. I don't know what the story is behind the stick. I'm still trying to figure it out. But it's really interesting because with a lot of these tribes, the information that's available is very dependent on how many of them have like immigrated to Europe or America and gotten access to the internet and had the platform to tell their stories, right? Because if not, then Europeans are telling it for them. So with the Wolof, it was a little bit harder for me to find as many resources, and a lot of the resources are in French because the French are the people who were harassing them. The Wolof were also involved in revolts. The Wolof were also heavily involved in slave trade. Unlike a lot of the tribes that we've talked about today, the Wolof are one of the only tribes that I've read about that have a slave class. Like you are a slave for your life, your children are slaves. But just like everywhere else, slavery is very different in the Wolof society versus everybody else. So, well, Europeans. In Wolof society, like the slave class is more like a labor class. You're still not allowed to like discriminate in the sense of like you can't go up to a person in the slave class and be like, hey, slave. Like, that's still really disrespectful and frowned upon. You know, there's a certain respect that you still give them. But they do kind of frown upon intercaste mixing. So if you're from a political class, you're not allowed to marry someone from a slave class or something like that. Which I don't agree with. I don't agree with caste systems. I understand that I'm sure it has something to do with the how they want their society to run and things like that, but I don't personally agree with it. And so because they had been involved in slavery already as a people, as well as I'm sure Islam and kind of frowning upon people who are not Islamic, they were just heavily involved in the slave trade. Um, but that also means that they were selling each other, you know, your village would sell the next village over. So because of that, a lot of Wolof people were also taken to the Americas. And so the first slave revolt in North America was organized by Wolof people in present-day Dominican Republic, or Hispaniola as it was known at the time, in 1521. According to oral histories, it was led by a Wolof couple, Maria Olofa, which is obviously Wolof in Spanish, Olofa, and then Gonzalo Mendinga, who was probably Mandinka. The revolt was defeated by the Spanish army occupying the island, but it was first of many attempts at freedom by the people of the Americas. And lastly, we have the Chamba people. The Chamba are located in Nigeria and Cameroon. They have two languages, Dhaka and I gotta move the thingy to see the second one. I can't remember the second one off the top of my head, but it's okay. They are skilled in mask making, pottery, sculpture, and metalwork. The Chamba were targeted by Fulani jihads, also known as like, you know, the wars to convert people and the slave raids in the 1700s, and many were taken. To avoid this, they moved up into the mountains so that they could have the leverage of, you know, like fighting downward and also being able to hide. And so the Champa bravely fought off the slave caravans and were able to avoid continued enslavement. The Chamba are another example of folks that you can't really find a whole lot of information on them. The most information and a lot of these pictures I found through Facebook pages of Chamba people, you know, proudly expressing their identity and sharing their culture on the internet. So, yeah, but what's really cool is even through some of their textile traditions, you can see connections with tribes near them. There's this one tribe in Cameroon, one of the very large tribes in Cameroon called the Bamileke, and the Bamileke are known for having clothes that are like black, red, and orange. And so you can see on the bottom right a picture of Chamba folks with very, very similar textiles of that black, red, and orange. So the way that we intermix and inspire each other is very, very cool. And here are some examples of Chamba art and masquerades. The Chamba bull mask. I've seen that bull mask a lot just in looking at African spiritualities and stuff. So it's very cool to see specifically who it was from. And that specific dance is to mark like a tradition into adulthood, you know, the ascending of teenagers into adulthood and whatnot, which is cool. And then we see a Chamba female figurine on the left, some of their sculptural traditions. And then on the bottom is a Chamba pot, which tells a cautionary spiritual story. And I thought it was really interesting, this pot. Just the composition of it in general, you can see essentially it's like a spirit is the handle, and then it goes into the pot and is creating this like facial animation on the pot, you know, like sticking its head through Beetlejuice style. Um, and it's really cool because it reminded me of the face jugs in South Carolina. So these face jugs are often left on grave sites and they're made to be ugly on purpose, in order to scare away bad spirits. And so I just thought it was really cool that pottery tradition continuing. And something that's really cool about the face jugs is that white clay that's used for the teeth and eyes is a specific type of clay. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but that clay is native both to North America and the Carolinas and to Africa. That's our last tribe. Uh, any questions about those tribes before I move on? Nope, no questions. Okay. With all of that information that you just learned, I love to talk about the Black American identity, how it is evolving, how we are learning about ourselves. And a lot of Black Americans feel very disconnected to the label of African American as more continental Africans are moving to the United States, right? So, like, we have a lot of Nigerian Americans now, Ghanaian Americans. And so, on a technical level, they would be African American, being that they're Africans born in America, right? And so there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I'm not African, I'm not that, which problematic take, but I understand what they mean. We have a unique cultural identity. And some folks don't like the label of Black American because they're like, well, race is a European construct. And so to all of that, I offer the word Solan or Solani, which is a phrase growing in popularity. It offers a unique cultural identifier beyond race that acknowledges our unique history as African Americans. Um, Solan means the people of soul. And what's really cool is they use that double A in the spelling to reference African American, which we were called for a very long time, without actually using the label. So I really like it because we are the people of soul, soul food, soul music, all of that. And I love us having our own unique cultural identifier. I think a lot of people in the diaspora do. An example being the Garifuna, who are Black people from Honduras, and they are like their own youth. They have their own unique traditions, their own unique culture, even though they're Black Hondurans, right? So I really like it. And then I also wanted to include at the bottom the Black Heritage flag. If you've never seen it, it was created in 1967 by some brothers from New Jersey. And each part of the flag has a significant meaning. The black being, pride in melanin, the red being the bloodshed for liberation, and then the fig leaves and the blunted sword as like peace and intellect. Like we have the weaponry to beat y'all up, but we choose not to because we're smart and kind. And so yeah. And I love playing this game with folks. I don't know how well it will work if you want to throw it in the chat. So basically, I want you guys to guess which picture is from Africa and which picture is African American. And I'll give you like a minute or so, throw it in the chat. You could just tell me, oh, I think one is African American, or I think two is blah, blah, blah. I'll give y'all like 15, 20 more seconds.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I think the Black Americans on the right, and I think the African Americans on the left with a color picture. Is that correct?
Oh, so one of them is African, just African. One of them is African American.
Oh,
Yeah.
African American.
Yes.
The black and white.
I think the black and white is African American.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your guess. We're about to go through it. Okay. All right, let me look at the chat. Let me see what everybody guessed. Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are typing. Oh.
Were we supposed to not answer?
We're asking questions or typing.
Okay, somebody said the right being African American, first is Africa, left is African, right is Black American, second is African American, first is African, right is America, left is Africa. Okay, okay, okay. Somebody said, is this a trick? Are they both African? Okay, I'm not trying to trick you, I swear. But it's hard to tell, right? Y'all are great though. I feel like we're intuitively connected because you guys are 100% right. The first one, the one in color, is from Nambia in the 1950s, and then the one in black and white is African American, Black American, Solani, whatever you want to call it. So the second picture, oop, that's not.
I got 100, y'all.
Yeah, y'all got 100.
Oh, wait.
The second picture is the Gullah Geechee in the Carolinas. If you guys are not familiar with the Gullah Geechee, you definitely should be, because they have been able to preserve so much of our early African American, Black American culture. The Gullah Geechee are located on coastal islands off of the Carolinas, Florida, Georgia, and because they were they were on rice plantations, and of course rice requires a lot of water, so that's why they were on the coast and on these islands. And so because they were on the islands, they were able to have isolated communities away from slave masters and white people and all that stuff. And so they were able to maintain essentially before African American vernacular, our original patois, our original uh mix between African languages and American languages. And it's really cool getting to see how some of their words have are direct words from Africa and that beautiful connection and stuff. And, a lot of folks, like I said, like because they don't know better, they're like, oh, I'm not African, I'm not this. And I can understand, like, when you only know contemporary Black American culture, how easy it is to say that. But when you look at our history, when you look at these two pictures and you can't tell the difference between the two cultures because we're so extremely similar, it's just such a silly thing to say. But yeah, very, very cool. And then these are some more heritage tribes. I will give y'all a couple minutes to write them down. As you can see, there are so many folks that were taken during enslavement, and I could not go through all of them in one presentation or we would be here all day. But they're all really cool. They all have their own traditions and textiles and art and all these things that influence us and who we are. And I do want to, for a second, move to the map that I was talking about, this map over here, and how, like, when we look at this map, starting from the very tip of Africa, you can see the western tip, of course. You can see the Wolof on there. You can see the Fulani. You see the Malinke, Mandinka. Like I said, it's the same people. And then you go along the coast a little more to Benin and Ghana. You can see the Akan, the Fon, the Yoruba as we get into the curve of Africa. Um, let's see, the Igbo, the Bamileke, which I mentioned briefly. Who else do we see on here? Then you go down the coast, you can see the Congo, the Mbundu. So yeah, it's just really cool getting to kind of be a little more familiar with the vast continent that is Africa. And as you learn about these tribes, they can be a starting point because, like I said, as tribes are neighbors, they're intermixing, they're sharing traditions. You kind of get to open your world up more and learn even more about the West African coast, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to give y'all a couple more seconds to write down these other heritage tribes if you're looking to do more research, and then I will move on to our last couple slides.
It's your camera. Better write them down. Tom, you can't hear me, can you? Muted, right?
Okay, let's move on. And then this is just the tribes that we talked about, all in one list so that you guys have these as well. I'm pretty sure that this is the end of my presentation. Yeah. Conclusion, the African diasporic culture comes from a vast weaving of many different tribes and ethnicities across West Africa. Each tribe has its own distinct traditions related to food, clothing, spirituality, politics, and more. Additionally, many of these tribes are neighbors or even distantly related, meaning they share certain cultural aspects as well. And learning about these tribes helps us better understand and identify the beautiful connection between Black diasporic people and their original roots. Um, when I did this presentation at the library, I did get to show a video, the Bata dance. I don't want to deal with video in this presentation. I know it's going to be like too much in terms of technical difficulties and stuff. But if you guys want to see a really beautiful example of our dance traditions, and the origins of a lot of our dance and music traditions, please go look up the Bata dance. It is BATA dance. And it's just really, really cool to see. But yeah, thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to share all of this information with you. Thank you for sticking with me through all this information. And I hope you took wonderful notes and, get to do even more research about these things because they're all really, really cool. I will open up the floor for questions, comments, observations, all those things. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Ms. Randolph, I would just like to acknowledge my family and friends. I have Tamala, who's on from Virginia, Richmond. I have Trinity from San Antonio. I have Juan from Washington, D.C., Maryland. I have Jerry from Alabama. I have Liz Elizabeth Simpson from San Antonio. I have Alaric from Chicago, Trina from Phoenix, Arizona, and Candace from Virginia, and Andre from Georgia. And I just want to say thank you guys for giving me the gift of your precious time. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to share with you what I had heard from Miss Randolph, and I just knew that I wanted you guys to hear it too because it impacted me deeply. And thank you, Miss Randolph, for who you are and what you're doing.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you
I'll
so
jump in. Hi, I'm Liz Simpson. I just want to say that this was really phenomenal. I learned a lot. I took a lot of notes. I have my own research to do to follow up. So thank you. This was rich. It wasn't too dense that it was overwhelming, and I learned a lot. So thank you.
Oh, so
And
happy.
this is
And this is
Ron
Andre
Smith.
Daniels jumping in, and I'd like to say I would love to have your presentation if you can share it. I put my email address in there, and if you got more stuff to razzle dazzle me with, please bring it on.
Okay.
But this is Juan Smith, and I'll say ditto to what everybody said before me. And I enjoyed everything that I saw and I heard, and it is a precursor to me going to Ghana next year. So
Yeah,
thank you.
Good job.
of course.
Good
Mom
job.
actually just moved out there.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, she did. She said that it's definitely been more difficult. I think the most difficult aspect just finding stable work and stuff because they got their own issues. But in terms of course, just being there in the sun and the air and all that is really nice for her. So
Looking forward to that. I've been to Egypt, so this is the next place.
that's awesome.
Yes.
So much. Thank you guys so much. It means so much, all of your wonderful comments. I'm so happy.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm Donna. I'm on Miss Maxine's phone. I'm over here watching the presentation. I'm one of Miss Maxine's guests. And it's so awesome because I'm from the Caribbean, grew up in New York, but listening to all the different things about the Orisha and the Shango and well, we used to call him in Trinidad Bra Nancy, not Anansi. And we made a joke of it where someone would elaborate on a story about themselves to exaggerate themselves. And we would say, don't listen to him. He's telling you Nancy's stories.
Oh.
I do remember those stories when I was a kid with the spider. We call him Bra Nancy. So it's good to see, things. And like you said, like the religion, it was ingrained in you to say that it's bad. It's a kind of corrupt, devilish behavior. But now the people are embracing the actual religion because you see a lot of younger generation, even in their 20s, they teens, are actually embracing the Orisha and the Shango religion
Yeah.
in Trinidad. That what I'm learning now, since I've been visiting, as well as, understanding, more about the different tribes. And we see, from looking at, visiting, growing up and back and forth. So it just brings back memory and how tradition is still passed on from all these years, to me. And, I've bought books for my kids because they do sell books that you can buy with all those old traditional stories and folk tales and stuff like that, and the food and all the different things. But yeah, thank you. It's really nice. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you guys.
I have something I would like to ask. So I always felt like Ancestry.com and all of them was a way like the government will get to have your information. And I'm like, hey, I don't really feel like I want to give anybody my blood or DNA or any of that, if I don't have to, right?
Yeah.
Even though I know they can find me if they really wanted to get me. But just ping this phone, I guess.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, hearing everything that you're saying, it seemed like the only way that I'm going to get there, because I'm just wondering, out of the blue, Ancestry just came out of the blue, right? So, how do you feel about Ancestry.com? Is that something that you recommend?
Yeah. Yeah, I had the same exact issues with it, the hesitations. My partner is actually a genealogist, so they were the one that was like, "Nah, you should take it." And I was like, "I don't want to do that. The government's
Mhm.
gonna have my stuff, right?" So I looked into the fine print of, what am I giving up? What access do they have to me and stuff? And something that eased my mind a little bit was that you can actually choose to have your DNA like wiped from their system after getting the test done. So you always have the ability to say like, you know what, I don't want you to have this anymore. I want you to like destroy it. And so that honestly is probably something I will do in the near future, is like finally be like, okay, I don't need it anymore. You can destroy my stuff. But yeah, I mean, Ancestry I did my kit and it helped me like learn so much about myself. Of course, the specific areas of Africa that I'm from, but even just like stories about my family that I didn't know, crazy stuff like that. And then also it connects you to a lot of like cousins and relatives and stuff. And honestly, like I haven't had any bad experiences yet. Like every time I talk to a relative that I've met through there, they're just happy to know more and to know me and all of those things. So I also really recommend it for folks who feel disconnected from their immediate family and want to like get to know their extended family. Please never be afraid to get to know that extended family, because usually they're just so happy to know you and that you exist. But yeah, I think if you want to know what specific parts of Africa you're from, one of those DNA kits, would probably be the way. And, at the same time, if you want to just go off of the assumption that you're a little mix of each, that's totally okay too, because honestly, most African American people that I've seen their test, and even Caribbean Americans that I've seen their tests, they are like 7% of each or something like that. You know, Benin, Togo, Yoruba, just going all the way down the list. So, you know, I don't think anybody will fault you or check you for assuming that you're related to certain ethnic groups, but if you want to be sure about it, then yeah, ancestry would be the way to go.
This is
Okay.
Juan jumping in, and I did that. And so, as you were talking tonight, I was looking at my results. And as I mentioned earlier, the two places that I recognized that were on my results, but there's also the 20, the breakdown is different, but 26% is Cameroon, Congo, Southern Bantu people. And then I have 2% German and Europe. So,
Okay.
and then there's some others in between, but I won't bore you all with it. But
Mhm.
I think it worked out for me and family members. I have met a lot of family members that I didn't know, and I found out a lot of information that I heard and didn't know for fact. So
Mhm.
I think it's okay, and they already know everything about you anyway.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and what
I'm sorry, but anyway, all right. I
okay.
Thank
And
you.
what I did in my genealogy research, I've gotten to the point where I really need to do the DNA to go farther. I've done extensive searching based on the information I can get from internet and the website and the family tree documents and organizations. And what happened in my search, my son, who's military, indicated that he had done a DNA. So I got a chance to look at his, and I thought, okay, that's good enough for me. I'll just use his DNA as opposed to mine. I've been a little, maybe at some point I will have it done, but right now I just decided that I just don't want to do it right now.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing too, through me doing my DNA, we kind of have a picture of my dad's DNA, my mom's
Mm.
DNA, and so on and so forth. The first person in my family to do it was my aunt on my mom's side. So I was like, okay, I know my mom's genetic makeup basically because they got the same parents. And yeah, so then it was just my dad's side that I wanted to know. And I knew he wasn't going to do it because he's very like, I'm not giving the government my stuff. I got to do it. But, now we know, which is very, very cool. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Any
you.
other questions, comments? I love talking with y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just wonderful to hear the presentation again. I enjoyed it the first time and just as much this time. Thank
Ditto.
you. Thank you.
Thank you guys. And I put up the name of my page on Facebook if you want to follow me and keep up with all that stuff. Yeah. I do actually, I sell this lesson plan as well.
That thing
But I
over
don't
here.
mind emailing it to you guys because
Mhm.
I like y'all. So
Yeah, this is Elvin Simpson.
Like you
I
too.
was at uh,
It's all right here.
I was at the library meeting too and enjoyed it. The second presentation was just as good, as not better.
oh, thank you. So kind, y'all. If we
Good
don't
to
have
see
any
you,
other,
Alvin.
I'm sorry. Oh, good to see you. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, anything?
Yes, Ja, I have a question.
Hi.
Hello. How can we get in touch with you through Facebook? Is your Facebook your name or is
So
it
I
under a
have
different name?
this page. This is the name of my Facebook page where I post like all of my lessons and stuff like that.
Okay.
I also, I believe on my Facebook I have my work phone number. You guys can feel free to like text me through that. And honestly, I enjoy just answering questions in general. I'm not stingy with my information or my sources or anything like that. I'm just happy that more educated people are in the world, so I don't have to do the work of educating everybody. So, yeah, so please feel free to visit the Facebook page and you'll see my number and you guys can contact me. We can schedule another group lesson. I have a lot of lessons besides this one. I talk about,
Okay.
just Black American history in general, Texas history for the folks that want to know that, Black and Native American relations, revolutions, all that fun stuff. And I have a list of all of the lessons that I offer also on the Facebook page. So.
Apparently,
Oh,
I'm
that
missing
sounds good.
something. Did you put the
Okay.
Facebook
Yes.
page information somewhere?
It should be on the screen right now. I don't know if do you guys see my
I
screen still shared?
I
If
don't see.
not, I will put it in the chat for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I want to say something.
Yeah, please.
At the same time, my wife is dealing with a Black entrepreneur newspaper in Winston-Salem. So we would like to spread your word
Oh,
out there in our advertisements.
Mhm.
sounds amazing.
And I'll be keeping in touch with you through Facebook about that as well.
Sounds good. You guys are also welcome
And
to
I'm
just
also
message me
interested
on
in your other lectures. I'm interested in as well.
Facebook.
So I can also share with people in Winston.
Yeah.
And that's in North Carolina, by the way.
Awesome. Just fun fact, my people are originally from North Carolina, so I'm very happy.
I'm from
Yeah.
New York.
Oh, see, so I'm originally from New York. My mom is Dominican. My dad is African American. His dad's side of the family has been from Nash County, North Carolina, since we got off the boat.
That's my county.
Yeah, Nash County. So like Rocky Mount, that's where my great grandma
That area.
lived. And technically my dad's adopted father, who I get the last name Randolph from, is from Virginia. So it's really awesome to hear so many people from so many places so near and dear.
Yeah, and we're interconnected. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so feel free as well, guys, to message me on Facebook too if you guys have any questions. I do tend to be a little slower with answering on there, but I try my best. So, and I would not suggest calling my business number just because I get so many spam calls every day that I can never tell who's a real customer and who's a spam. So text me, please, if you can. But I'm so excited to stay in contact with all of you, continue to spread information and help you guys do your own research and all of that. I will open the floor one more time for questions. Please feel free. And then we will close up.
Just one more time. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Y'all butter me up. So sweet, so flattering. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, comments, none of that, thank you all so much for joining me once again. It really fills my heart to be able to share my little baby that I created and for it to bring other people like so much joy and so much inspiration into looking into themselves and doing things for their community as well. So again, I'm very, very excited to stay in contact with you all, to share more of what I have with y'all and the world. And thank you so much for sticking with me through all of this. And yeah, have a wonderful night, you guys. Stay blessed, stay beautiful. Have a good one, y'all.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Night.